podcast.
All right, here we are, Voice of Electronic Music, episode number 65 with Riffa of OKNF, and he's got releases on House of Hustle and a bunch of other, a Box of Cats, a bunch of other labels. How you doing, man?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Doing good. Yeah, it's what is it today? It's Tuesday. Is it Tuesday? It's Tuesday.
Yeah, better than Monday.
Yeah.
Good.
I just lose track during the quarantine. It's like, it doesn't even matter. I just know, like, when the next thing is I have to do, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, I definitely feel it. These days are all the same now because we're all stuck in our houses. I feel like they just are exactly the same. There's no day really that I'm identifying when I wake up.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool, man. Well, thanks for joining me and doing this podcast episode. If you're not familiar, Riffa is a DJ and a producer from San Francisco, and from the East Coast originally, I think, but you've been here in San Francisco for the last couple of years. You've got lots of releases. You do tech house, mostly bass house, with releases on House of Hustle, Box of Cats, My Techno Weighs a Ton, Rock Bottom Records, LW Recordings, Admit One, Hood Politics, and worked with a ton of different artists. So and you play at Halcyon a lot, and I feel like every time you come in, you're going right to the DJ booth, and I'm like doing the streaming or the lights, and so we haven't really had a ton of time to connect and chat. But I'm glad to be able to sit down and talk to you.
Definitely, man. Thanks for having me out. I'm definitely happy to, talk about everything in the music industry so far. And you're so right, man. We never really got to catch up because it's just I'm right there, right in the center. I want to be in that booth immediately.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, Sean was telling me a bit about your transition from the East Coast here to San Francisco, and I didn't realize that you'd only been here like 2 years. You kind of like came in swinging, right? Like you've got a bunch of releases. Your stuff is really good. Music is really good. And
Thank you.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of it too. Like I was kind of, prepping for the podcast yesterday, and I was listening to your stuff on SoundCloud. And I think before I realized it, like, normally SoundCloud will play a couple songs and move on to the next person. And I checked back like an hour and a half later, and it's still playing off your channel. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, man, it's been a good run. I started really producing more and releasing more once I moved to Brooklyn back in 2015 ish. So, from there, it was just a quick turnaround. I got involved with OKNF there pretty quickly. So then things kind of started moving along the ladder, so to speak. And then, I've been putting out stuff for a few years now. Lately, it's been a lot crazier, a little bit bigger, as far as labels go, but yeah, it's been a never-ending task for me to keep it going.
That's great. Yeah, I love to hear that. I wanted to ask you a little bit about kind of how you got started in music in general, and then I know a lot of people are kind of getting started themselves. A lot of my listeners, and so they're interested in hearing how pretty much everyone has a different story as to how they got started, how they tapped into the industry, because if you're an outsider looking in, it can seem like kind of a intimidating thing to get your foot in the door, right? So how did you get started, and like what was the scene like on the East Coast as well?
Yeah, it's funny, I've been doing music my whole life for the most part. Started when I was younger with piano and guitar, and then I did almost like every single instrument I could get my hands on when I was playing in band, from, saxophone all the way to trombone, whatever, just crazy stuff there. And then, went through my whole metal phase. I played in some hardcore metal bands in college, dealt with that for a little bit. And we actually were, pretty solid. We had a couple of records that we recorded and things like that. Played a bunch of shows. And then I moved to Richmond for college, and that's where I was doing a lot of the metal stuff too. And yeah, I went to a show for the first time, and it was a dubstep show. And that was in like 2008, I think. And yeah, man, really crazy. Didn't start off with house music so much, but the dubstep stuff got me going. And like, I started DJing that, and then it went from dubstep to a little bit of trap music, more bass music. So it was very like focused on like hip hop when I was younger. So that was more of an easy transition there. And then I started realizing I wasn't into like such heavy stuff, so then I took those, hip hop kind of R&B influence and roots and realized that house music was just, flourishing with those types of influences. So, so many artists from the inner cities, that grew up with that, like urban music, and really just soul music, put their stamp on, the house music game. And that's kind of where I started finding another love for house music, and it's been house music ever since.
Nice.
So, I got to give mad respect to everybody that kind of started that movement, because it's given me a love that I've never really been able to find elsewhere. So
Yeah,
it's pretty awesome.
absolutely. Your story isn't completely unique as far as going from metal to dubstep. Like, I know that dubstep was an interesting thing that kind of spiked in popularity. I mean, it just was crazy. Like, it felt like it took over the music industry, but also like it made its way into Chevy commercials and like all this stuff. Like, it really kind of like came in swinging. And, I think that it was hard enough, aggressive enough to capture the kind of metal heads out there, you know? And then of course they're like, oh, well, I like this electronic music. I can do this. I think a lot of maybe other, like metalheads would think of electronic music as, EDM, typical EDM, or super, flowy house music or something. And then dubstep was like, no, this is actually, I can headbang to this,
Yeah. It's funny because a lot of the like bro step, more American style dubstep that was coming out in the early like 2010-ish area to 2015 kind of was more so like a breakdown in a metal song, right? It had like the standard like slow kind of drums with like a ride on top, and then it was a bunch of crazy noises which would imitate, the vocalist screaming, or the chugging of the guitars. And so there are a lot of like direct similarities that I could pull from what I was doing on a day-to-day basis in the studio with my band. So, from there, obviously I'm like pretty social person. I like to talk. So being out in the clubs and experiencing like a majority of people that were willing to come out to these shows versus like the metal shows gave me like a little bit more inspiration. I could pull from the crowd a little bit more. Also, the ability to do it like week in and week out. Whereas with a 5-piece band, you're struggling to find shows like left and right. So that jump to electronic music really gave me more consistency, I would say, which was awesome. So that really started off my DJ career. About 2008, I started DJing for the most part, like on and off, not a ton, and then gradually moved to where I was DJing like 3 to 4 nights a week in Richmond, where I went to college, doing like bar and club nights, doing top 40, stuff like that, but always kind of sliding in my own influence, old school hip hop, and then house music where I could, things like that, like K-Tronada, trying to bring in that kind of influence, which is really dope. And then, yeah, man, like I said, I moved into house music, and that was just a whole nother beast. And I would say I didn't ever want to go back after I got into house music, and it started affecting my day-to-day DJing. I was like, man, I'm tired of playing top 40. Like, I want to have some artistic integrity. I want to play what I'm making. I want to, like, play what I like every time I'm playing. And then that eventually turned into like 2014 or so. I remember I was playing in a bar, and I remember like at the end of it, I was like, hey, I'm never going to do this again. Like, I was like, I don't want to play a top 40 set ever again in my life. I was like, as much as I love like some top 40 records and like pop records and things like that, I was like, having people tell me like what they want to hear a million times a night, and like not being able to just flow and like show people what I'm about, like made me upset as a musician, like when I'd been able to play my own records for so long before that. So then, man, like from that point on, I was dedicated to making my own music and really focusing on becoming the artist that I am kind of now and moving towards every day of my career. So it's pretty unique. And, we can move into how I got started with OKNF and all that soon, but that's the lead up to when I started really producing and started releasing records and things like that. It's kind of how I got started, I guess you could say.
Nice. Yeah, I know what you mean. Being a top 40 and even hip hop DJ, you kind of open yourself up to people just assuming you're multi-format. And that can be frustrating, I would imagine, for a lot of people, because, top 40 and hip hop, like, is everyone thinks they can request the songs that they want to hear, where no one in, no one in their right mind would go up to a house music DJ. Maybe some, if, oh, hey, you got this track or whatever, but it's a different thing, right? It's like, it's almost like you're expected to play the Drake song that just came out that, Susie wants to hear at the bar, because all our friends want to dance to it, right?
Yeah, and it's like, the top 40 clubs, you could be fucking slaying it, like on the floor, and people are dancing everywhere. But you have that one person, guy or girl, it's happened, sitting at the edge of your booth, like, but please, like, play another record that I want to hear. And like the entire club's dancing, and it's like, play something we can dance to. It's like, oh, like all of those people over there dancing?
Right, yeah.
Like, what do you mean? So that was always a frustrating thing for me. It's like, no, I'm not switching it up for you just because you're the one outlier, So, and I feel, pretentious saying that, but after, like 4 years of being, in that role, it takes its toll, I would say. And there's nothing wrong with top 40 DJs. I have some friends back on the East Coast that I know that are phenomenal, like absolutely people that I admire still to this day. That are just absurd top 40 DJs that like I give mad props to. But for me personally, it just wasn't my thing. At the end of the day, so had to get out of there. But,
absolutely. So let me.
Glad I did.
Let me ask you before we get into the OKNF stuff. How'd you get your alias, your musical alias, Riffa?
So it was one day like 2008, 2009 ish, I believe. And I'd always play guitar, right? So I was thinking about like guitar riffs. And then I was thinking like, what is a riff, right? It's a catchy melody that you can quickly hear and then, it's memorable, right? So if I'm DJing, I'm taking one catchy song or riff and I'm blending it with another catchy song or riff. And I'm doing that consistently, like I'm the riff up.
Yeah.
Like I'm ripping, So yeah, I wanted it to be something quick, something easy, something fast that you could say, and people would remember it. And like now, I'll be walking anywhere, and people are like, "Yo, Riff!" Like they don't even call me by my real name, So obviously, like I think I did an all right job picking it. Like it's easy to come off the tongue, So
absolutely,
that's where paid off.
Nice, yeah, I think it's great. It's got a good ring to it. And so now how did you get hooked up with the people at OKNF?
Yeah, so I moved to Brooklyn like 2015-ish. Really random. Like I was in Virginia, like living with my mom in an interim after like a relationship like breaking up and like leaving DC and going back home. And I was like in the middle of a bunch of shit. And like, on a Wednesday I did my final interview, and then Warby Parker, I used to work for, that glasses company, was like, "Hey, can you move up and start Monday?" And I was like, "Wait, what?" Like, all right. So I booked it up to New York that weekend, like took all my stuff. Luckily, my friend had a couch crash on for a couple of days, and then a room was opening in his house. He's like a college, high school friend. So that worked out really well. And then I was looking at stuff on SoundCloud, and I was like in the house vibe, and I saw a hashtag that said Brooklyn bass, and I was like, "What is Brooklyn bass?" Like whatever. And I clicked on it, and it was like all OKNF records. And the owner of OKNF, Clem, like one of my best friends, was the one running it. And I sent a record to the DMs that had like nothing to do with OKNF whatsoever. It was like, it's actually still on my SoundCloud. It's the Legend record that I have, and it's like a John Legend sample. It's like, "All I could do is love you," and it's like more like UK kind of vibey house type shit. And yeah, he was like, "Hey man, this isn't for OKNF at all, but I really like this, and like I'd 100% like help you get this signed." And I was like, "Oh, word? Like that's sick." I was like, "Well, I definitely still want to like, link with OKNF and like produce stuff for OKNF, whatever." And then like from there, we just kept on talking, like back and forth, kept DMing, follow each other on Facebook and stuff, and then started talking there. And then realized that he was like a couple blocks away from my house that I was living at. And I was like, "Yo, this is crazy. Like, what are the odds of this?" And then, we hung out. I ended up meeting like a bunch of different producers, like West End, for instance, is like one of my good friends as well. He was on OKNF with us in the beginning there. And we all became like this crew. It was me, Clem, West End, my buddy Adrian Hex, Ian, who was doing A&R for Audiophile XXL. So he was doing that for the past couple of years. He's one of my best friends from Virginia Beach as well. And then Aylin, Andrew Lynn, like we all became like the crew in New York. So obviously like all of those guys are doing their respective big things, you know, and it's like, it just helped build that bridge to all of these different areas in the music industry. And yeah, it was really neat to just like have that friend group. Ian, Adrian Hex did A&R with us at OKNF as well. So we were all kind of working together. We were all playing shows together. We were all, you know, putting out music here and there. And it just kind of blossomed into this really nice friendship and like work relationship with, you know, some of the best people that I've met like to this day. So that was a really unique introduction that just really allowed itself to grow in a really like lucky way.
Totally.
And I think with the music industry, you've probably heard, like it's like lightning strikes, right? You only get so many opportunities, and not everybody gets an opportunity to meet some people that have influence, you know, across multiple different platforms. So, I got lucky with a bunch of different people that do that. And I, you know, I have my friends elsewhere too in the music industry with Webster Hall and things like that. So I really got to meet so many people at once. And that's kind of how it is here in San Francisco too, to be honest. It's like, first day I was there, I was with my buddy Charles Meyer, and he introduced me to people at Audio, and then he introduced me to Rhea and Sean over at Halcyon the same night. And it was like the first night I was in San Francisco. So, you know, it's like, wow, like what are the odds of that? I've just been really lucky, man. I wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah.
So,
well, I guess if you put yourself in the right scenarios and you or situations and you surround yourself with the right people, you know, things like that work. And, you know, interesting too, that, you know, you like from a label perspective, you know, I know releasing my podcast and releasing my own music and stuff, you know, a lot of times you end up using these hashtags on SoundCloud or whatever. And you're like, what, how effective could these actually be, you know? But then, you know, like, you know, in your instance, you saw a Brooklyn bass and you're like, what's that? And you follow it, and then that leads to that. And also too, I mean, from a demo submission point of view, you submitting to the label. I mean, I know I have friends, I have part of a record label with my buddy, other friends that have record labels, and they just get like a crazy, surprising amount of demos just all the time. And so it's cool to hear, you know, that and you know, as an artist, it can be a little disheartening sometimes because you submit stuff and then you don't hear anything back, you know, sometimes ever. But you know, I think that it's probably usually just the fact that there's so much music coming in. But it does work. You can actually get a hold of people there, you know.
You know, and I would say, you know, with OKNF now, we're definitely much bigger than we were when I sent my stuff in. So we're getting quite a few more demos, you know, consistently than we were previously. But we've always made it a really big point when we're going through the demo pool or through, you know, anybody that's submitted a record directly through us, if they know us or something. If the quality's there and you can tell that there's like a genuine passion behind it, like even if it's not for us, we send it to other labels. We're like, hey, like so-and-so, like you guys might want this record. Like it's not for us personally, but like, here's this thing. And it's like, I don't know if every label is doing that, but we've always taken it upon ourselves to really help the people that we think are like us. And we've always been like the mantra of the, you know, the label has always been to help the bedroom producer who's never been given a chance, but is, you know, firing on all cylinders, because there's quite a few people that don't necessarily have the know-how or like the connections or the confidence for that matter to really like go and get what they deserve. And you know, it's up to us too to like help that person. Yeah. You never know who could be like the next big thing. And like people come to us and we help them out. And then, you know, we've got a number of artists under our label who are now huge and who still like tag us and stuff, you know, and it's like, just dope. Yeah. It's like, you look out for people, people look out for you. It's a mutual respect thing. And I think that's really important, and it somehow gets lost along the way sometimes, but at no fault of, you know, too many people. When you get to a really big level, it's really hard to reach out to everybody. Sure. You know, without it being like a canned response of a yes or no, you know, but if we're listening and we really genuinely feel that way about something, we help no matter what. Yeah. So that's always what I would say is take the risk. If you're a young producer, take the risk.
Totally.
There's no harm in sending it out. Don't be aggressive about it and oversend and send a million things that you know aren't ready.
Yeah.
But if you're confident in your stuff, you think it's good, like, but you don't know the people, you think you might not get a response, send it anyways.
Yeah.
You're going to get at least somebody somewhere is going to see it somehow.
Yeah.
And get a better chance, I guess.
Totally.
To be seen.
Totally. Yeah. And, I think also too, I realized at some point that like, your music might not might not be ready, to be sent to a label. And I'm speaking from personal experience, I had years back was sending stuff out and I liked it, but I kind of underneath it all knew it wasn't quite ready. You know what I mean? And then I just kept working at it, kept hammering at it. And then, my skills got better, both with arrangement and composition and just general ideas and mixing and mastering. And, at some point, if you're showing your friends and stuff, I started to realize people were saying like, oh, dude, like you should send this to X, Y, and Z label. Like this sounds like it would. And then, and so once people start saying like, hey, maybe you should send this to a label, it's a good time to like consider starting to send your music to labels, right?
Definitely. And I think all of our friends are also, guilty of like hyping you up early, like to get you, stuff like, yeah, man, like that's dope. But then you can kind of tell the difference when they're like, oh shit, like this sounds like so-and-so, like whatever. When they start being more specific about things, you can kind of realize and actualize a game plan to go and really seek out a specific direction there, I would say. So yeah, it's definitely been for me something that I've done. Like I play a lot of everything, like, from any different house genre. But, I specifically try to be myself, and like I've sent to like every label under the sun, man, and I know people there too, but it's like, there's no harm, no foul. I think in this day and age, people get really pigeonholed. They think that they have to be one direction only. But like you look at like some of these huge guys in the industry now, and they're making like, super proggy stuff, or they're making like, really bouncy stuff, or they're also coming in. You have like Eli Brown types that are making everything wild, really like, or like Melee, for instance, making like techie stuff and also making like really worldly stuff.
Yeah.
And I think if you do it well and you do it properly, like there's no reason that you can't like attack multiple different angles. So whenever you're feeling, as long as you're writing what you like and it's good enough and your friends are telling you that it's dope, I say throw it anywhere you possibly can. Yeah. And like for me, for instance, first record I sent out there wasn't an OKNF thing, but somebody sent it the right direction. So somehow it's going to get to the right spot.
Absolutely.
And that's definitely some big insight that I can get.
Totally. That's great. How much do you think working with and being on OKNF has kind of shaped your own personal sound?
Yeah, it's been pretty cool. I think I've been able to pick and choose what I really like. I'm really selective when it comes to specific types of sounds and things like that. But it's definitely given me insight into like what I don't know.
Sure.
Right? Like there's producers and stuff that send things in like I've never heard before, which gives me like reason to go out and search for stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think I've taken influence from a lot of different things, stuff we don't even sign for, like, instance, and then I've implemented it in my own production, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really big thing when you're running a label that you get to benefit from, is just that constant cycle of records coming through, and just your ability to take from it what you will, what you like. Well, yeah, it's a really unique way to like grow and prosper.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, there's an inherent benefit from doing anything really, as much as you would do, working with the label, or like for myself, for instance, like this podcast. Like I do this podcast because it's a ton of fun. It helps people that are wanting to tap into the scene or just have something to listen to or entertainment. But then I get the benefit because I just sit here and I talk to people and get, this kind of confirmation of thoughts and techniques and strategies. And so it's pretty cool, and I think that it can feel difficult at times because you are putting so much effort and I'd really like to be making music right now or whatever, but going through all those demo emails, or me like going through the stuff for this podcast, like it actually makes my music better than if I were to just sit there and try to like hammer out like 10 albums a year or something.
Exactly. And also, seeing the way that things are done from a label perspective by a lot of different artists, you know, it really gives you a sense of how not to do things and how to do things and how things rub off. You can really dial in your way of communication with other labels that you're using, you know, to further your career. So, and, you know, labels are mutually beneficial, I would say, to the artist and the label. So, not to discredit anybody there, but yeah, like I think it is really unique to be able to just consistently see the cycle of artists coming through and how they're like approaching the whole process. And I think what's really unique recently is that with this whole, you know, era of getting your music out instantly and almost releasing like a record a month, I think people are so much more impatient these days when sending in demos, and they just constantly like, you know, send follow-up emails or try to reach you on any social possible. And it's like these people that just go above and beyond, like, and just invade your personal space. I've really realized like never works. So the demo process, if I could give anybody some insight there, I would say send your records and forget about them.
Yeah.
Realistically. Yeah. I would say don't ever focus on one record that you've just written. It's more than likely like not going to get signed by the label that you wanted to do. So it's hard to get seen by that unless you have a direct in. So my biggest advice is write that record, send it out, start immediately on a new one. Keep going and keep sending them out. And like eventually you're going to hear back from somebody that you've sent it out to, you know? And I would say my buddy John Summit is like one of my good friends too. Like, you know, he sent out a record, didn't hear back for a freaking year about it. And then it was on one of the biggest labels that he's released it on, you know? And it's like, that's saying something, you know? It's like somebody telling you no from one label and then one of the biggest labels ever picking it up a year later.
Right.
You know, and it's like, that's wild.
Yeah.
You know? But you don't have to keep following up. People are going to see it. It's going to make waves if it's good enough. And rest assured, if somebody's not following up with you, more than likely there's a reason behind it. So, you know, one email here and there, maybe 2 weeks down the road or 4 weeks down the road is enough. But the consistent, like, finding who you are on Facebook or finding you on Twitter and just, like, badgering is a way to make a bad impression, I would say, because we're all doing the same thing. We all are taking the time out of our day to try to make it better. And we're not giving anybody, you know, like the finger, so to speak, when listening to demos. Like, we're not purposely going out of our way to deny you that, you know, experience. So yeah, people pick up on that stuff, and you only have one impression with a lot of these labels. And you want to make the best impression possible, and to be pushy is never a good thing, especially in an industry that is consistently slow to have anything happen in it. So yeah, just, I don't want to be negative by any means, but yeah, I think it's important to like let these kids know, and like these people that are coming up, like, just be positive, stay focused, go to the next record. Yeah. Like, if the record you just sent isn't good enough, the next one might be. Right. So keep focusing on the next thing. Right. It's huge. And have a list of 20 records, you know? Keep sending. Yeah. That's the biggest thing I could say. Yeah.
And you know, like you said too, I mean, you might not get that particular track signed to that label, but you might get something like they send it to someone else, or like I sent my my most recent EP to No Mana. And I just found, you know, it was like he was having a discussion on Reddit and was like, oh yeah, send me demos or whatever. So I just fired it off, you know, and it wasn't even his genre or whatever, but he was like, dude, dude, this is awesome. This is insane. You know, I'm going to forward it to my manager. And I was like, oh, it's amazing. You know, like, it didn't go anywhere because it's not even the right genre, but just even that bit of confirmation is enough to be like, cool, headed in the right direction. Let's keep hammering down that path. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And another cool thing too to think about is, like, say you fired off a single to a specific record and they're like, hey, what else do you have? Yeah. Like, you've got that record like on backlog that you're still proud of. Obviously you're sending it out elsewhere. You never know what a record label might pick up as like a 3-track EP. Right. So having your backlogs filled with records is always a good thing. So keep crushing it. Like, keep adding to the list of records that you've got ready to go, because all of a sudden people are going to start asking you for records. And if you don't have things to send out, you're going to be in a real shit spot, and you might not be able to get that first impression again, which is a really big thing for sure. Totally.
And that being said, you know, firing off demos, I mean, So assuming you don't hear anything back, how long do you give it? Do you give it 2 weeks? Do you give it a month? I mean, because at some point you might just want to put it out on your SoundCloud.
Depends on the label,
Yeah.
right? So I would say your mid-majors, I would say 2 weeks. Give a follow-up email, be like, hey, just wanted to reach back out about XYZ track. You know, like, what did y'all think about it? If yes, great. If no, is there any feedback you can give me for the next one that I send? You know, just be positive about it. I want any sort of response that can help me grow in any certain way possible. That's your biggest goal, like at that point, right? I would say for the majors, I would say probably 4 weeks to 8 weeks. Like, you're more than likely going to have a month backlog, like, just to be perfectly honest. And in some cases, I know a lot of these majors like Dirty Bird, Night Bass, they almost have like a year catalog ready to go. You know, it's like, it's crazy. So use it to keep that in mind. Definitely don't be the dude that badgers. But I would say, you know, 4 weeks to 8 weeks is a valid time frame for you to follow up in an email if you've got an email to send to.
Sure.
Like, that's fine. They can't fault you for that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was talking to Nate 08, who does A&R for Admit One, and he said something that really kind of blew my mind. I mean, this is something I kind of already knew, but it was nice to have it refreshed. You know, he said, you know, if you're listening to the stuff that's coming out and you're trying to copy it or whatever, like, you're already 1 year behind the current sound, because
100
producers are making stuff that they sit on for years sometimes anyway, and then it finally gets released, but it could be a year before that even makes it out to the platforms, and then you're hearing it.
Yeah, it's 100% true. Like I said, you have these labels like Dirty Bird or, you know, Night Bass, things like that. Like, they do have a year catalog ready to go.
Yeah.
Like, those kids might have sent it out 8 months before that.
Right.
So you think about it, it's 2 years later. This record is coming out from the time that they actually produced it, you know, which is pretty insane to think about. So on that note, you have to think about, like, the way that the music industry works. Yeah, some people, lightning hits, they skyrocket and they go, you know, huge immediately. But for the most part, it's a couple of years before, like, things really start to happen for you. And it's like, for instance, for me, this past year, I've had some of my biggest releases yet. I don't expect things to really pop off for the next year or two, you know, like, now that I've made these connections, things like that, I'm setting the groundwork right now with these releases that people know me, and then I can send out legitimate music consistently from here on out to really set the path forward. So
totally,
I expect that. Everybody should be expecting that, because not even 1% of artists get that once in a lifetime moment where all of a sudden they're just famous.
Right.
So you have to keep that in mind. It's a lot of hard work. It's not easy. And time is definitely something you got to get used to dealing with, I would say.
So let me ask you, you know, in 2020, what should people be focused on, singles or albums or both, or what do you think is best?
You know, what I would say in that vein is really whatever works for you. Whatever you can get signed, do that when you're an up-and-comer. Anything that you can be a part of as a budding and up-and-coming artist, you should do. I would say for the more intermediate to professional artists, for where I am now, I'm really going to be focusing on either singles or like 1 to 2 track EPs with like remix comps there, because like, we should be putting out consistent music across the board. People have really short memory span. So I'm trying to get as much music out as possible consistently. And for the past couple months, I've been taking a little break, just kind of jump starting my backlog again, getting things going. But yeah, I'm looking for more singles or for comps that are filled with big artists. I'll put a single on there. Or yeah, like a 2-track EP, for instance, with a couple of remixes by some heavy hitters, things like that. Just to really get the content out without depleting your reserves of records, because like we talked about before, you never know who's going to ask you for more.
Yeah.
There's no need for you to put out a 6-track EP.
Right.
You know, like most of the time, the listener's not getting past the second record anyways.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unless they really, really, you know, love what you're doing, they want to listen through. Like the standard individual on Spotify, it's listening to 1 record.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so at that point, I think, yeah, it really is. If you're an up and coming person, get to know your friends in the industry and get to know the artists that you're coming up with and you're kind of come up class, which is what I've been doing. Now I'm friends with a ton of these guys who are phenomenal artists, and I'm really lucky to, have them as homies. But once you get a little bit bigger, I would say really focus on your career as a whole and get out the records that you think are really, really, really class, and don't waste your time dropping a million things on one place, because people are more than likely going to forget that in a month anyways.
Yeah.
So pick and choose for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. What's that being said, how do you keep yourself? I mean, because we were just talking about how the large volume of stuff that you have. How do you keep yourself like productive in finishing songs?
Man, it's a struggle that I think all of us artists have. The typical thing you think about is like, oh, I get to the mixing and mastering stage and immediately start another project and don't finish that one. Or like, I'm at 80% done with it and it needs like one or two more elements. And I'm like, I'm going to go do something else, I recently have been really focusing on trying to get like a core idea down in like a small amount of time. Like I'll try like with 30 minutes to an hour, I'll try to get a really dope idea down, right? Something grooving really nice. And then I save those projects, and then I'll wait till the weekend, because work is like pretty wild. As an up and coming artist, more than likely you have to have a day job. So my work typically through the week leaves me a little bit drained creatively. So I try to lay down like the boring parts, right? That don't require that like next level flow, for instance, because I'm pretty drained mentally.
Yeah.
So lay down the drums and maybe like a little bit of a bass line and like some minor FX work. Then on a Saturday or Sunday, I'll wake up and I'll have a fat cup of coffee, smoke a J or something, and just get in that creative headspace. And like, I'm much more creative when I work off of a previous idea, whether or not I change that entire idea as a whole and like replace almost everything in it. At least I have like a direction to go in, and I don't have to lay down the bullshit first, because that leaves me an hour later not accomplishing anything.
Sure.
If I can like create some cool creative aspects while replacing other aspects of the groove I laid down, I'm in a much better position moving forward. Because the worst thing is you getting bored with what you're writing and then not wanting to finish it. So trying to stay as creative as possible for as long as possible, and not wasting any of that creative energy on the boring shit for most part. So I mean, for me personally, it's a really big way I go about it, but I've heard a ton of different ways to do it. But I'm ADD, so
me too.
I need as much possible time as I can on one creative aspect at a time.
Something that has worked for me is kind of delegating certain aspects of the music production process to specific times that you may or may not have more energy or less, or more creative space at any given time, right? So just like you said, like, if I'm tired and I'm sitting here and nothing is really going on, and it's like, oh, I could watch some Netflix or something. And maybe I might actually watch Netflix, but I could also be laying down some drums, or something that's kind of, I don't want to say like menial, but it's like, it's kind of the foundation, right? Like it doesn't take like 110% of your creative thought process, right? Or doing some arrangement, or even like just like synthesis, like I'll put on something, a podcast that I'm listening to, Joe Rogan Experience, and I'll turn over and fire up one of my synths and just create some patches, because that really, like, I can do that kind of just mindlessly, and not mindlessly, but almost to a certain degree. I almost get some more interesting results when I'm paying a little bit less attention, if that makes any sense. Just kind of the happy accidents thing, especially with synthesis.
And those are the biggest things in production, man. Some of the best like bass lines or some of the best leads that I've written have been happy accidents, moving things around incorrectly, like, and like dropping it in the wrong way, like, or messing with the filter that I didn't mean to mess with, and you're like, whoa, what's going on?
Right.
So definitely when you're like, what? I didn't mean to do that, but dope.
Like, those are my favorite.
I'm right there with you, bro, for sure.
So what are you using to produce then?
I'm in Ableton. Straight Ableton. I love Ableton, like the layout. I've been used to it for quite a while now, so it just seems easier for me, I guess.
I think it's the best. Safe to say, I think it's the best.
The only thing is, sometimes it's obnoxious the way the sound quality is out of the master on Ableton compared to like Logic or FL. I would say the out of the box sound almost sounds like like brighter and punchier out of another
Hmm.
like DAW. But I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it is what it is. I think at this point now, once we get a good master done by somebody else, it always sounds all right. So,
Sure.
you know, can't complain.
Yeah, yeah. I did back when I was in school. We actually did a DAW shootout where we listened to them blindly, and and
Yeah.
had to say this was this and this was this, and we couldn't tell. Like it was basically there
Yeah.
was I think they're all the same algorithmically, but the conclusion that I
Yeah.
came up with is I think that while the algorithm is the same and kind of colorless, the plugins
Yeah.
themselves that come with the app
Yeah.
are going to change the overall character, right? Because if you use
100.
all Ableton plugins and all, FL Studio plugins, those are going to have a slightly different, even if you do more or less the same things, those are going to have a different flavor.
Yeah, like sound goodizers.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That'll change your shit up pretty quick.
Yeah.
So,
What?
definitely, that's what I think I've learned. Like, it really is the makeup,
Yeah.
the genetic makeup, so to speak, of all the samples and stuff you're using inside of all those, different DAWs. It's just, it sounds different.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. What are you using any hardware or anything like that?
No, man, I'm pretty much out of the box. I like to stay as Ableton specific as possible.
Sure.
I really do think within Ableton, when you're using its stock stuff, I feel like you get the most power out of the actual plugins that they have available for you. So, like Operator, for instance, is probably one of like the most powerful like PSCs that you could use. I think like the majority of my shit has been done in Operator lately, like as far as basses and things like that. Obviously, I'm using samples from Splice and things like that to create like layers and all that stuff with like my drums and all that. But as far as like creative wise, like basses and certain synth aspects and builds and things like that, like Operator is the jam.
Yeah.
Really, really unique there. As far as like EQs and stuff go, I'm using like Fab filter stuff here and there. You get some really good like hard cuts and things like that with like Fab stuff.
I think Fab's the best. I love their stuff.
Like I think Fab for sure. Like, and then when I move into like my synths, I use like Serum and Massive for stuff. I think Massive you get a little bit closer to an analog-y sound, like more so than Serum. Serum has like this inherent like weirdness to it that you can instantly tell it's Serum. I feel like a lot of times, which is cool. And then outside of that, I think one of like my favorite plugins to just mess with things with is Manipulator.
I've got that.
Like Infected Mushroom. Yeah, it's really cool, man. You can make a lot of different crazy sounding stuff with that, or just manipulate things like the title of the PSC to like sound any possible way other than it was initially intended to sound.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, that's a great one. I mean, it's more or less, I think it's just pitching and adding like harmonies and that sort of thing and weird blends and filter cuts. But I mean, holy shit, like you can just say anything into it and it just sounds dope,
Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of like big noises, or a lot of basic noises that are just powerful in general, like a sine wave, even out of like Operator.
Oh, you're
slightly altered.
You're using it for stuff that's not just vocals.
Oh, 100%.
Wow.
100. So you're throwing it on like an Operator, like a sine wave or like a little bit of a sine square or something like that. And then you're adding these textures with Manipulator that you never would have gotten before. You're blowing it up.
Yeah.
And like, it's really dope when you use like a really soft, simple sound and then create something wild and crazy out of it with Manipulator. So yeah, definitely would recommend trying.
Yeah, that's a great one because I mean they pitched it, marketed it as a vocal manipulator, and I think that's where I think everything that I saw was just them using it on vocals. But I mean, using it on anything would be dope, like a synth or a basic sine wave or saw wave or square wave or whatever. Yeah, crazy.
So it's the jam.
Yeah,
try it out. Man.
What as far as like arrangement and stuff go, are you the kind of person, because I have a lot of people on that say, well, I really just have like 2 or 3 arrangements and I just kind of stick to those because they work? Or for you, is it like every song is a little bit different and you kind of just feel it out?
Yeah, for me it really just depends. I have some typical like arrangements, like as far as like house goes, you can have a decent amount of variation, I would say. But it really just depends on the song, man.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever I'm feeling, whatever it gets a little stale or boring, I try to switch it up or something. But yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think it's good to stay locked in necessarily to any specific type of arrangement because you never know, what you're going to want to do or how it's going to sound. So you can get pigeonholed there. And I've been in that position before where like for 6 months, I've done like the same style. And so everything starts sounding exactly the same,
Right.
So try to switch it up as much as I can.
Totally. I noticed in a lot of your tracks, you're doing you're automating your hi-hats to go from like a lower pitch to kind of like a higher one. And it's a really, I've heard that before, but it's a really good way to like kind of keep the energy up in tracks, which is very important for house music because otherwise you clear the floor. Like what are some other things that you're doing to kind of keep the energy high?
Yeah, I think like thinking about it logically, you're trying to go from like something to something different and then back in house music. You don't want to go too crazy and blow it up to something that you can't recognize anymore. Because people love to hear something, catchy and then go away from it and come right back.
Yeah.
So I try to like think of it in that manner, right? So I'm either adding like a reverb, opening it up a little bit, and you're getting like a little bit of wider of a sound, and then closing that reverb back up, especially on like builds, things like that. You're getting so crazy big, and then tightening it right back up, and it's right in the pocket. Same with delays, like things like that. I'm really going for. I think really adding some minor variation when it comes to the percussion, like, you've got your open hats typically and like a running hat or something. You want to add your rides, and you want to add like a rise to your rides or a down to your rides, or you want to add, your like cowbell or like a little clave or like, something like that. And you're just, finding some way to make it different, I would say. But as far as automation goes, for sure, like for transposition of the rides, that's definitely a key one that I always use. And then those delays and those verbs, I really try to like manipulate for sure to try to get a little bit crazy.
It's drum. I feel like you could teach a whole college course just on like drum programming. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can keep it real simple, but I think the most difficult thing is to keep the ear entertained over 4 to 6 minutes without making things sound too crazy, right? It's a lot of like really subtle, small changes. One thing I like to do is I watched some tutorial years ago now, but using Filter Freak, like the original one, Filter Freak 1. From Sound Toys, and with Filter Freak, you can actually make it has a self automation thing where you can set it up so the top end of the filter is going like this over time. And if you throw that on your hi-hats, it makes the hi-hat a little bit duller, which you can fix with an EQ or something. But just those subtle little bits of movement, you do that you do that to a bunch of things, and the whole thing just sounds like so much more organic and evolving.
And it's almost like play on velocity in that aspect, right?
Yeah.
So like almost mimicking like a human aspect of standard drum play, right? So you're not always hitting something as hard as you would every single time. Like so it's variant. I think that probably is like a really unique way to attack something. I really thought of it that way, but it's super cool.
I feel like velocity gets overlooked a lot of times. People forget how important velocity is. And adding little bits of randomization. There's in the MIDI plugin section of Ableton, there's an add random function where you can dial in however much random you want. I use that on basically every MIDI track, even if I play it in, just because it just adds those bits of randomness and organicness. What about swing? How do you utilize swing in your tracks?
I typically use swing in every track that I do, for sure. So, for instance, like take a hi-hat loop, right? Like typically I'll take a hi-hat loop and then I'll move things around or like I'll take things out of it. But then from there, I'll extract the groove out of that hi-hat loop and then I'll add that groove to a number of other things. And it gives a more organic feel to the record, because everything's kind of within that hi-hat groove, which is typically what drives a lot of your movement in your drum grooves. So that, and you're like off, oftentimes snares and claps and things like that.
Sure.
But yeah, it's really a unique way to kind of bring and glue things together within your record, which is really fun to do. And then other things that are really cool to do, especially within Ableton, is like, say you like a specific song, you like the way the drums and the bass play off of each other, right? And you're kind of making a similar style bass line. You can't quite get your bass groove right. You know, I'll go ahead and I'll bring in like a 4-bar, 8-bar section of that track that I'm kind of trying to mimic, and I'll extract the groove directly from that 8-bar section and like add it to my bass line, right? And I don't always do like 100%. I'll go into like the groove pool and take it down to like 68% or something like that, and just lightly throw it on there. And then you, in a way, you can kind of mimic that push and pull of a record that you're trying to imitate, or at least take influence from. Which is a great way to just quickly get on the same page. You know?
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, ultimately, like, you know, that is the absolute last thing any lay person would be able to point out, you know, if you were to ask them. But it is super effective, right? It's like if you want to have a similar kind of like feel. And, you know, for me, like, I honestly, I tend to think that, you know, even if you straight up copied an arrangement or like a groove or something, I think that there's so many other elements to a song that makes it uniquely yours that I really don't think that you know, utilizing stuff like that makes it any less your own, right?
Right. Not at all. And I would say, like, from an artist's perspective who knows a lot of artists in the game, who knows a lot of people that are, you know, at multiple different levels in their careers, I would say that all of them are really going to tell you the same thing. It doesn't matter how you make the record. If it sounds uniquely your own when it comes out and you've, you know, crushed it and it sounds great to other people and they're dancing to it in the club, as long as it's not a copy of something, no matter how you got there, it's dope.
Sure.
Like, people are using every shortcut in the book they can to get out as much quality music as they can as fast as they can. So I don't, you know, I used to be like a purist, like, I would personally try to be like a purist and like not try to use loops, like try to make everything on my own, you know? And it's like, no one's going to recognize that open hat loop that you put in your record. Like, no one's going to do that. So why waste your creative time on that aspect of the, you know, the record when you could just throw it in there and do it, or take that groove off of a record that you're trying to, you know, emulate and then make it your own in the bass line. Bass line's not the same. The preset used or whatever, the bass that you made with an operator is not the same. So it's still yours completely. You're just trying to get that feel, right, of something that you know works. So there's really no harm, no foul in my mind.
Totally. Yeah.
We're using the technology that's there for us.
Exactly. Yeah. So I have this theory that I've talked about a number of times on the podcast, but I think it's a good one. So I like to harp on it. But like, you know, the same way, like as a DJ would select different songs that aren't theirs, right? And then put that into a DJ mix and that becomes your sound, right? Well, like you didn't make those songs, but that's your sound, right? Because your ear is selecting these songs. And I think that on a more minute level, it's the same thing with samples, right? Whether it's a synth patch that you made, or it's a loop that you found that you like, and just use it straight up, or you chop it up or do whatever. These are you're kind of becoming like a DJ of the individual sounds in the production process. And so that's kind of your overall sound. And I agree with you, man. I kind of went, I tried to be the purist thing for a while, and it's just kind of exhausting, to be honest. For me, it's a level I know my quality is there, so now I'm trying to push a level of consistency and try to push out as much music as I possibly can right now, right? But the most important part of that is being inspired, and you have to kind of manufacture inspiration sometimes, because you're not always going to be inspired. You're going to be tired or whatever. But a great way to keep that inspiration level high is just by using loops, chopping them up, because you're making it easier on yourself, right? And I think that that's such an important part of the music making process, because again, like you said, the person that's listening in the festival isn't going to be like, that is synth loop number 85 from Splice. Like, how dare you, sir?
Exactly, dude. It's so true. And whatever you can find inspiration from, like you said, if you hear a music loop in some splice back and one of the pieces of it, inspires you. Like, I've written entire records off of a single one shot, from a new pack, right? And just because it was in a pack doesn't mean that I'm stealing the pack or whatever like that. Like, I got stoked on it, and that's what got me to make an entire record. You wouldn't even know it's there, but it's there. It doesn't make me any less of an artist, and you'd be really surprised to see what a lot of major artists are doing. So I'm not going to give up their secrets or anything like that, but I'd say to anybody listening, I'd say do whatever you can to make a dope record. And that's the best advice I can give anybody at this point.
Right. I actually kind of like it sometimes. There's a whole subreddit on Reddit that's dedicated to finding the samples that Flume uses in his music. And he uses a lot of specific, like one specific company. I can't remember it off the top of my head. But he uses a lot of those. And I from a producer and a fan standpoint, I actually love it because I'm able to kind of like reverse engineer when you hear the original and then you hear what he did to it. And it's kind of inspiring in its own way. You're like, fuck, this is incredible. It sounds so good. And really, that's all you care about. Just being good. So also, Sean had told me that that you've got some upcoming projects and potentially tours planned. What are you working on?
Yeah, man, there were some crazy things in the works before, all this COVID stuff happened. Obviously, I hit like 2 tours in the past year, which was a really fun experience, and being able to book those all on my own and then go and play like sold out shows in other cities and other states is such a crazy feeling. That was really awesome. I've got a lot of music like backed up too, which I've been working on pretty consistently. I've got about 12 or 13 records now. That are just backed up, kind of hanging out. Got one coming out on House of Hustle's like 100 release like comp or something like that. I think they hit like 100 releases, and this is going to be the big compilation of like major artists that they've got on their backlog. So I've got one coming out with them, and then I'm just waiting kind of to sign a couple other records. I've really just wanted to get out quality over quantity here moving forward. So like this past weekend, I just pretty much finished up something with Nima G. I've got a couple records with Truth and Lies. I've got, a couple singles on my own. All a bunch of different styles too, man. It's like really fun, kind of just working off with no pressure. I'm not worried about signing anything right now. People know who I am. When I come back heavy hitting, like I'm going to be on the bigger labels that I've been like aspiring to be on. So I'm not going to take no for an answer there. And until I can write records that, deserve to be on those labels, I'm just going to kind of hang. I don't want to push myself to keep, releasing things that I'm not 100% proud of. So I want to get to that point, and there's a lot on the way. I've got a collab with Nate and Sean that we've been tinkering around with for a while. I need to get that finished, but it's cool. It's just neat not to be worried about it. Like that's the glory of COVID. I think I'm not stressed about getting a record out when no one can play it live.
Right.
Live stream is dope. Don't get me wrong. But nothing beats the club for sure.
I know what you mean. There's been a lot of kind of surprising silver linings to coronavirus quarantine that I've realized, and for myself, it's just a ass ton more time to make music and really focus on. Like I feel like a lot of us are going to look back on this, and it'll be a crazy thing, and obviously lots of deaths, which is terrible, but. We might. Some people have theorized that it's gonna birth a bit of a renaissance after this. There's gonna be this huge boom afterwards because everyone's been so compressed, but at that same time have had all this time to focus on what it is they care about, and it's gonna be like a rainfall after a drought or something like that.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to see. I know. A lot of my friends have been writing different styles of music. A lot of people really honing in skills, having the time to do things that they never would have done previously. So seeing what comes out of it is definitely something I'm ready for, to say the least. I'm also just ready to get back out there, man. Like I know we've got a Halcyon stream coming up here in the next couple of weeks, which I'm stoked to do. But damn it, man, I miss playing those sold out shows at Halcyon. I've been so lucky, Rhea and Gina and everybody giving me, and Sean, of course, giving me the opportunities to play there. It's been sold out almost every single time I've jumped in the booth. So I'm having withdrawals,
Yeah.
man. I'm like, gross. Scratching my neck.
Y'all got any more of those nightclubs?
Exactly, bro. So yeah, it's crazy. I'm going a little bit nuts, I guess, at this point. I'm ready to get back out there for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, cool. I wanted to I want to ask you one thing that I saw on one of your profiles before we end it here. So the new two-door Bronco. It looks like you
Yeah.
are you're gonna get that when it comes out?
Yeah, man, I definitely am. I think growing up, it was just such an iconic car. A lot of my friends had Broncos and like the old like 80s, early 90s Broncos, big boxy ones.
Yeah.
My dad drove one around for a little bit, and I remember just being like enamored by it. I was like, this is the coolest thing, like a Bronco, like what? It's so dope. So yeah, it's like going to be my first big car purchase, but I don't know. I'm ready to have one. I'm gonna get the two-door with like a really dope package on it and try to cross country trek it and like go back to the East Coast, visit my family, get on the dunes and the Outer Banks and everything. And I don't know, just it'll be cool to have like something of my own that's that cool.
Dude,
I'm like
yeah.
ready for it.
I'm a huge car fanatic myself, and like I hadn't even until I saw this on your profile. I hadn't really like heard about the new Bronco, but this thing looks fucking sick. And like they have a bunch of different packages, and you can get it with a twin turbo V6, which is just like insane.
Yeah, dude, it's so customizable. And even if you get the base package for like under 30K, which is pretty dope, like you can do anything to it.
Right.
You know? And it's like the doors and like all the windows and stuff just pop right off with like one wrench that says you can do it all with, which is like insane. And like, I don't know, it's just anything you want, you can do with it, which is pretty neat.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see what it all it has to offer for sure.
That's amazing. I'm very tempted. I think eventually I'll probably, because I'm a Subaru guy, so I'll always have like a Subaru. But I think I would like to have a truck, something I can take off road a little bit. So I'm looking at these, or maybe I know that the new Blazer is kind of a little bit more aimed at like the soccer moms and that sort of thing. But it's got some serious power and it looks pretty good. So I don't know. I'm kind of torn. Do I want like a pavement princess, or do I want something I can actually take off, on the dunes?
You know, I wanted something rugged. I think that's why I lean more towards the Bronco too.
Yeah.
Like just in case I ever wanted to go and just like get off the grid and go do something. You never know what the future's gonna hold.
Especially now.
I was like, yeah, man. I was like, I'm gonna get myself something that I can just go like bail out.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like who fucking knows, man? I'm nervous.
About
the future state of things.
Throw some wood in the back and a hatchet and go live somewhere. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Cool, man. Well, thanks for doing this with me. Do you have anything you wanna plug, your website or SoundCloud or anything?
Yeah, definitely. Whenever you release it, if you could throw the SoundCloud links in there,
Mm-hmm.
I believe SoundCloud is the ending is I am Riffa, which is my SoundCloud and then I've got on my Spotify, I've got a new playlist that I've started curating. I just dropped it actually right before this interview. So it's Riffa's Rump Shakers, and it's going to be 10 records every 2 weeks that I've personally downloaded to my crates that I will be playing out, and I will be playing on live streams and things like that. Just a little bit of an insight into my mind as a DJ.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of gives you a look into what I'm interested in and kind of how I'm approaching, my sound these days. And it's going to be filled with stuff that, might not include any of my friends or myself. Like this week, for instance, I was going to include anybody necessarily that I know. But moving forward, I'm going to try to like incorporate a couple homies, maybe let some friends, curate one of the weeks. And just wanted to be a little bit more down to earth and, a little more personable to the fans, to just give them a look at like what I really dig. Yeah. Because you're getting what music I'm putting out, but you're not necessarily hearing what music I'm listening to, or wanting to play. So sure. I think it's a cool little idea I've got, and I just posted it on my my artist Facebook and everything there. So yeah, just peep that. Riffa's Rump Shakers. You can search it on Spotify, and that's it's a little fun for everybody to have.
I like it. That's awesome. Cool. I'll make sure to list that in the description of the video.
Sounds good.
Yeah, cool. Well, this has been episode number 65 of The Voice of Electronic Music with Riffa of OKNF and House of Hustle. Thank you all for listening. If you like what we do here, I have a donation link in the video description, which takes you to my website. Anything you can give helps. It's just going to go towards getting more, fun people on and kind of administrative stuff, hosting costs, that sort of thing. And again, if you want to listen to previous episodes, you can basically Google the name Voice of Electronic Music. We're on basically every major streaming platform. And again, I'm Scott Brio, and thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.
See ya.